Hello, my name is Kate Parmer and I'm with the League of Women Voters. I will be your moderator for this virtual candidate forum. We believe that even though we do miss something by not being in person, there are advantages as well. Many more people who otherwise might not be able to attend in person will be able to hear the answers from these candidates that will help them make a more informed decision when they fill in their ballots. A couple of housekeeping items. Audience members will all be on mute and off camera, so it isn't necessary to mute your phones or silence your dogs. We have already asked the candidates to please silence their phones, however. If you have any questions, please click on the chat icon to send us a message. If you don't see a chat icon, click More to find that. The League is proud to be nonpartisan, neither supporting nor opposing candidates or political parties, but always working on vital issues of concern to members and the public. The League of Women Voters moderates candidate forums, such as the one tonight, all over the country, using a format generally considered fair and balanced, yet informative. We have asked the candidates to defer from any personal attacks, but rather keep to the issues of the position and the campaign. Our goal is for voters to be able to learn more about candidates than from campaign ads and social media, and for the candidates to display their competency for the position they are seeking. This forum is being recorded and is copyrighted by the League of Women Voters of San Diego for the private use of our audience. Any other use of this video without the consent of the League of Women Voters San Diego is prohibited. The recording will be posted on our website, lwvsandiego.org. We asked attendees to submit questions for the candidates online before the forum. Those in attendance may also submit questions using the link provided in the chat box. Please remember to use civility and respect and word your questions in a general way so all candidates can respond to them. There will be no questions directed to just one candidate. The question screeners organize the questions to avoid duplication and assure topics of greatest interest are being asked within the time available. Screeners will also ensure that questions asked are appropriate for the branch of government involved in this forum. Those assisting tonight are the following. The question screeners from the League are Ann McDonald and Jane Andrews, and the timekeeper tonight from the League is Janelle Van Dusen. Tonight, for the school board forum, we also have a youth moderator in training from our Youth Empowerment Committee who will be asking a couple of questions from local students. We will adjourn our forum tonight by 7:30 p.m. With that said, I want to thank the candidates for being willing to participate in tonight's event and to thank all of you for joining us to become a more informed voter. Let's begin. This is the forum for the Office of San Diego Unified School District Board. We are using the League of Women Voters format. Candidates will have 2 minutes for their opening statement, 2 minutes for their closing, and 1 minute to respond to each question from the audience. We will alternate who answers each question first. Prior to the start of this event, the order of speaking was determined randomly. The order will change for each question, and closing statements will be in the reverse order of opening statements. At this time, I'd like to introduce the 6 candidates. From District A, we have Crystal Trull and Sabrina Bazo. From District D, we have Richard Barrera and Camille Harris. And from District E, we have Sharon Whitehurst Payne and Lawana Richmond. And now for their opening statements. We'll begin with Sharon from District E.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you, League of Women Voters. I am delighted to be here today, and thank you for this invitation. I asked in the beginning, why are we doing it a second time? But it's like good teaching. The second time around is even better, and you can clarify some things. I just want to take a couple of seconds and talk just a bit about my background in terms of, you all know I have degrees from Duke and UCLA, and I've taught in San Diego City Schools, San Diego Unified School District, University, done things like that. But what I want to spend my time on today is talking about the question that came up about Proposition 15, not Proposition 13 as it started out to be. And I just want to say that that is a core value of mine because I was teaching before Prop 13, the old Prop 13, and I watched the custodial help. We had everyday custodians, we had all the supplies we needed, etc. And then when I was a teacher at Mission Bay High School, I watched the transition to the point now where our classrooms aren't clean, but maybe once a week, every 4 or 5 days. And teachers had to help move in materials, etc. The children became partial custodians. So my core value is that something went wrong with that, drastically wrong. Our schools are struggling to regain where it was before Prop 13. And now with Prop 15, we can correct that. And it's a core value in the sense that if you have an entity such as Disney that has corporations all over the world, and they are paying taxes in other countries, but in California, they don't want to give us the fair share so that our children can learn. That's problematic to me. And one of the things that Proposition 13 will do is to go in and correct that kind of issue.
Great.
So
Thank you very much, Sharon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Luana? Luana, you're on mute.
Here we go. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before your audience again. I'd like to start by emphasizing that we live in a moment when adversity and the opportunities it presents beckons us all to rise above ourselves. It may take another 100 years for us to find another moment as ripe with potential for change and innovation as the one we are currently in. I'm committed to serving the parents who seek guidance, the teachers who need support, and the children who are depending on us. I spent time in the foster care system as a child and in group homes, eventually becoming a teen mom and single parent. I found my way into the community college system, eventually transferring to and graduating from San Diego State University with a bachelor's degree in business administration, followed by a master's in information systems from National University, and finally earning a doctorate in educational leadership from UC San Diego and Cal State San Marcos. And I stress these things because in addition, I spent 15 years in financial business systems planning and analysis and development, and now serve as an organizational development manager at UC San Diego. I am trained and certified by various operational excellence and change management programs, and I'm a certified project management professional. I speak to all of those things because that background prepared me for this moment. All the while, I've worked and raised children who have also been educated in San Diego Unified Schools. I know firsthand the hope offered and the successes that can be realized through our educational system, and the issues and challenges that need to be addressed and remedied. And I, Dr. Luana Richmond, stand here ready to be a partner in the solution. Thank you.
Thank you. From District D, Richard?
Thank you, Kate, and thanks again to the League of Women Voters for hosting us again tonight. We all know we're in the middle of an unprecedented health and safety crisis. We also know that we have an opportunity right now because we're in a place of reckoning as an entire society over issues of race and equity. And so what we have to think about is, of course, how do we push through this moment that we're in? But how do we also recognize the enduring importance and critical place of the public education system in our society? Our public education system is really the only institution in our society that makes it possible that in the course of a single generation, a young person who comes into our system, maybe a young immigrant, somebody who's growing up in a family in poverty, a family that's stressed about housing and a number of issues, over the course of a generation, that young person can rise to become a major contributor in our community. And it is only the public education system that makes that possible. That's certainly the history of my family. I'm a first-generation American. My dad immigrated here from Colombia. We were struggling as a family when I was a little kid, when I started in the public education system. But because of the public schools, it made it possible to become a contributor in our community. And we always have to recognize that when the public system, when the public schools do it the right way, we create opportunity that would be impossible without a great public education system. I'm proud of the progress that we've made, all-time highs in graduation rates, college readiness rates, the number of dual immersion bilingual schools, that we've made over the course of this time in our district. But we've got so much more to do, and I look forward to doing that work going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Also from District D, Camille.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me to be here today. It's really a privilege, I feel, to be here and to speak here once again. Again, my name is Camille Harris, and I am a career counselor, a counselor educator, and a university supervisor working at a private university here in San Diego. I am passionate about education and student learning. As an educator and a parent, I believe all students deserve strong and knowledgeable leadership who will have their best interests in mind. I have over 12 years of working experience in K-12 public and charter schools in the areas of special education and academic and career counseling and higher education. I'm a native San Diegan who attended K-12 schools here in San Diego. I'm first generation college graduate in my family. My background in education is a bachelor's in business management, a master's in educational counseling, and a doctorate in educational leadership. I have one son, I'm a single mom, and he also attended schools here in San Diego. My plan and my hope for our students here is to initiate career readiness, school safety, leadership and accountability. I believe that the school board must have a working and collaborative relationship unified with parents and teachers. We must efficiently distribute school district resources and materials to empower and provide students with quality education that they deserve. So I hope you'll remember me on November 3rd and vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you. From District A, Sabrina.
Yes, good evening, and thanks to all of you for joining us. Again, my name is Sabrina Bazo, and I'm running for San Diego Unified School Board in District A. District A covers University City, Mira Mesa, and Claremont Mesa areas. One of the reasons that I'm running is that I believe that all our students deserve a quality education from their neighborhood school, regardless of where they live in the district. But unfortunately, not all areas of San Diego currently have strong neighborhood schools. Many families are still choosing to send their children to schools that are not in their communities. And this is not okay. We need to have equity across all of our schools. I hold my master's degree in public health from San Diego State University, and I've been a public health educator in San Diego for the past 25 years. Most recently, I serve as the executive director for the San Diego Academy of Family Physicians, and I also support the Riverside AFP chapter as well. In doing so, I've been working with many medical leaders from across Southern California, and in fact, across California itself. Many of these individuals have been on the front lines of the current pandemic, and as a nonprofit medical society, we provide health education to these physicians in order for them to provide the most up-to-date treatment for their patients. There's never been a more important role or more important time for this role, and I'm very proud to be providing these essential resources to our frontline medical workers. As a volunteer, I've been a parent volunteer leader in the district for the past 18 years. I've served as PTA president at the elementary school as well as the middle school, and I was for 6 years foundation president at Mira Mesa High School, which is the largest high school in the district. I've also proudly served on student site council committees as well as student governance committees across the board, and I hope you'll support me on November 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you. Also from District A, Crystal.
Well, thanks for having me. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. It's great to be here again. You know, a lot's changed in the past couple of weeks since we were here last, and it just seems like that's the way it's going. And it's time for change. As mentioned, my name is Crystal Troll, and I'm a longtime San Diego resident. I've been here since 1976. I'm a product of San Diego Public Schools, and education is one of my core values. And I feel that now is the time to really reimagine what education would look like. You know, I've always been one of those people that instead of complaining, I throw my hat in the ring and I'm part of the change. And that's why I'm running for school board, because I know we can make change. I know that we can do better. This pandemic has really given us a lot to think about, a lot to look at. And for us parents, I'm a parent of 3 kids, 2 in middle school, 1 in elementary school in San Diego Unified Schools. It's really given us kind of a peek behind the curtain. What's going on in classrooms, teacher quality, curriculum, expectations. You know, a lot of these things that parents sometimes took for granted, we really now have a better understanding of. And for teachers, some of the things that they're challenged with, how to deliver online curriculum, how to be able to reach all of their students. You know, we really have an opportunity to create change. My background, I'm a nonprofit professional. I've been in the nonprofit sector for more than 20 years. I have an educator background. I'm a university professor. I understand data. I understand governance. I know what it means to be a trustee. And I also understand what it means to serve the community. I am going into this as a parent who wants to make change, but also bringing rigorous academic experience, organizational behavior experience, budgeting experience, all of the things that you would expect of trustee, but I also bring creativity. I want to come up with creative solutions, working with the community, working with parents, working with stakeholders and teachers to address some of the ongoing challenges that we've had even before the pandemic, to ensure that our schools are working even stronger and better to make sure that our leaders of tomorrow are prepared. So I look forward to the questions today, and thank you for this time. My name is Crystal Troll.
Great, thank you all. Now it's time for the candidates to answer your questions. Each candidate will have 1 minute for their response. Due to the large number of candidates, I will not be repeating the question for each candidate. However, I will repeat the question at any time upon request. Extra time for rebuttal is not provided. We provide equal time for each candidate. First question tonight. What new ideas will you bring to address the achievement gap and the needs of our most vulnerable students? This time we're going to start with District D, Camille.
Well, I bring a different perspective to this because I am a counselor and because I work with students with various needs and learning abilities. I believe every student learns differently. So for me, it's something I always look at when I work with students. So I think it's really important that students are reached to where they're at. So in order to help them to benefit, what I've read and my research that I've conducted in the past, when I was working on my doctorate, the achievement gap doesn't seem to go away. So the only thing I could attribute it to is what the children aren't getting what they need at their basic needs. And like I said, a lot of times a classroom is taught, it's taught one way. And I think that needs to change. We need to look at each child individually, holistically, and to see how we can best support them. Also too, depending on what's going on at home. So again, I look at the child individually. And so I want to do whatever is going to help my student to be successful, and looking also to just what their learning style is. I think it's really important.
Thank you, Camille. Richard.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we need to first understand that we need to build on the success that we have had over the past decade. Again, Stanford University Learning Policy Institute, UCLA Center for Educational Transformation have recognized San Diego Unified as a national leader in actually narrowing that opportunity gap. So when we made the decision 10 years ago to make the UC A to G curriculum our core graduation requirement, a lot of people thought our students wouldn't be able to measure up and we'd see a reduction in the graduation rate. Instead, we've seen an all-time high in the graduation rate. So I think what we have to be guided by are the principles that when we together as an entire community, and when we set high standards and expectations for what our students can achieve, we can continue to see great results. That's what's happened over the past decade, and that kind of community-based work is what we will continue moving forward.
Thank you. From District E now, Luana.
Thank you. That's a great question. The achievement gap seems to be persistent, and there are some who would say it's insurmountable. I applaud progress that has been made in any area, and also recognize that there are challenges. One of the things I would like to see is a greater focus on closing the discipline gap, because I feel strongly that even the students who are not directly impacted in terms of being suspended or expelled are impacted by the experience of seeing the disparity and having that impact their learning experience. I look forward to helping to have the restorative practices applied in a more comprehensive way, and also looking at community school models in order to support students having wraparound support so that the other factors are also addressed.
Thank you. Sharon.
I'm really excited about that, and I think that we will see something this fall that is kind of revolutionary, in the sense that I've been pushing the system to make a change and to make that paradigm shift so that we focus on those who are in need first, rather than to focus on the general student first. And as a result of that, this fall, we're doing several things. We're bringing back the students who have the greatest needs first. That will help us to focus on their needs in person. And then we're also looking at what the Elementary Institute of Science and the Earth Lab are doing. We're going to get the high-powered people from the universities and the community who know their content area in science and visual and performing arts and other areas to come in as experts to work along with the teachers so that we can perfect and provide the students what they need. So those are just a couple of things that we're doing, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. From District A, Crystal.
Yes, thank you. So ways to address the achievement gap. Well, we know there's an achievement gap. You know, we saw district-wide, the latest data was that nearly half were failing English grade level standard and more than half were failing math grade level standard. So we know that there's an achievement gap. So we can use data, we can use data to address these issues and find out what's really happening at different school sites. But along with data, we have to also take into consideration some of these external factors that we've been talking about. What's happening in children's homes? What are some of their support systems like? What about teaching styles? We do know there is research that, smaller groups tend to perform better. So maybe looking at smaller groups in terms of learning environments. In the larger classroom, you can't really dive into certain needs for certain students. So I think really what I would want to use is the data, as well as understanding what's happening in the larger environment of a child's life and the student's life.
Thank you. And Sabrina.
So again, as I mentioned in my introduction about community schools and how important that is, as a health educator, I believe very strongly in the importance of the whole child concept. And this involves the 6 pillars of community schools, and the district is already starting to work some of these concepts into the schools. And in fact, there's a pilot program that's going to be launched in Logan Heights. And what it's looking at is all aspects of a child's life, because even as a mom, or a dad, when your kid is not, doing well, if they're not feeling well, or if they're just in other areas not doing well, they're not going to do well in school. So we need to look at all aspects of, a child, including their health, social services, family, and community involvement. These are all going to be concepts that will be applied in neighborhood schools in San Diego Unified as we move forward, and will be very important in addressing those students that are having the achievement gap.
Sorry about that. Moving on to our second question. How do you propose to address or eliminate the structural budget deficit at San Diego Unified? This time we'll be starting with District A, Sabrina.
that's a tall order. I think one of the things we're going to have to look at is the Family and Communities First ballot initiative that Sharon had mentioned in her introduction, and that's going to be important because, as she mentioned, there are many, billionaires in the state that have not been paying their fair share of taxes for a very long time. So that will help to partially address the issue of, of not having enough funds for the school. Other areas we're going to have to look at is, prioritizing obviously what's going to keep things away from the classroom, what's going to keep things away from the most vulnerable students, and how are we still going to be able to effectively teach the most kids in the most quality manner without jeopardizing that.
Thank you. Crystal?
Yes, it is a tall order. I agree. And I think that there are ways to approach this issue in a very strategic manner. So in my work in the nonprofit sector, we really focus on the mission. What is the mission of a new organization? So the mission of San Diego Unified is that all students will be prepared for college or career readiness, whatever their choices. So the mission would be reallocating any resource, which is physical, financial, human, or intellectual, any resource that the district has targeted towards that mission, what that looks like to prepare that student. So that means really taking a look at the budget, making sure that our spending is in line to fulfill that mission. I have seen on campuses in the district technology that was put in place that is outdated and having to spend money again on updating technology. There are things that we can do to make sure that we're spending wisely and strategically down the road, making sure that these are sustainable over time. I think also too, we need to address that we've had record funding up until last year. And so we need to be good stewards of what we have already rather than looking at other ways of these the measures. So.
Thank you. Moving on to District D, Richard.
Yeah, so when I started on the board in 2008, California had gone again over the course of a generation from being at the very top in investing in public education to being near rock bottom in the country. And then the recession hit. And then we saw historic budget cuts below those ongoing levels of underinvestment. And now we're facing potentially another historic budget deficit going forward. What we have to recognize is our district has balanced our budget every year, and our educators, our parents, our students working together have achieved record academic outcomes. But we as an entire community, as San Diegans and as Californians, we've got to step up and recognize that California simply cannot go on for another generation underinvesting in our schools. We have to build the resources that our students deserve. We've actually done that in San Diego by passing 3 bond measures over the last decade. We need to pass schools and communities first, and then we need to keep going forward and make California a leader again in investing in our public schools.
Thank you. Camille?
Well, first of all, when I think about having been, I wouldn't say a part of it, having been subjected to budget cuts before as a counselor in K-12, I think we need to look at what the existing budget is. I'd like to see where the money is going and see how best we could bring in more funds to support our students, because the disparity in the lower SES schools and students, there's a problem there. So something needs to change somewhere to be able to best support our students, to help them be successful. Because in my opinion, every student should be successful. And why do we keep running into these budget deficits again, year to year, school year to school year? So I want to see what we're doing. We probably need to do something different. So do grants, raise money. I don't know. I'm not really sure exactly yet, but we need to see what we have yet before we start going and start spending more money and pulling money from different area. And yes, we have bonds and things like that that come along the way, but we need to do things differently because obviously it hasn't been working. So why do we have budget cuts all the time? Something needs to change. Thank you.
Thank you. From District E, Sharon.
Thank you for that question. First of all, we need to recognize that technology is something that the bonds cover. So that's not an issue for us. That's why we were ready. The community passed a bond. We were ready when the pandemic hit, and we had all the devices we needed. We were ready. We were leaders in the nation. In terms of the budget problem that we're having, it's personnel. And personnel is the reason why we have to look at the fact that you can't keep hiring people and expecting them to work for less. And when you start looking at the things that have happened structurally at the state level, then that's where the problem is. And I think we've been advocating for that. But at some point, we are going to need to address that as a system, as a state, and make the changes that are necessary to improve.
Thank you. Luana?
So 2008, we dealt with similar issues in the University of California system. I want to start by saying absolutely we need to have schools and communities first pass so that we can reverse some of the harm that's been done by that reduction in revenue or that inability to collect revenue. But on the other side of that, we launched an initiative called Working Smarter, where we focused on operational excellence with the goal of a $500 million impact through cost savings and revenue generation. At the end of that 5 years, we had actually realized $663,794,000. But aside from that, I look at partnerships with the private and nonprofit circle, as well as other agencies to also bring in revenue. I think that it's a complex problem that took a time to get to, and it's going to take time to solve.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you. At this point, I am going to hand it over to our moderator in training, Radha Singh, to ask a couple of questions from local students.
Hi, everyone. As Kate mentioned, I'm Radha Singh, and I have 2 questions today from the students. So the first question that I have is, recently accounts on social media have risen that speak to disturbing accounts of racism and sexual assault local students have experienced. As a school board member, how would you plan to address these accounts and change the culture that is producing it? Further, how do you plan to aid these students in achieving the change they want to see? First, we'll be starting with District A, Crystal.
I'm sorry, Radha, can you repeat that one more time? That was a really long question. I want to make sure I get it all.
Yes, of course. Recently, accounts on social media have risen that speak to disturbing accounts of racism and sexual assault local students have experienced. As a school board member, how would you plan to address these accounts and change the culture that is producing it? Further, how do you plan to aid these students in achieving the change they want to see?
Okay. Okay. So, oh, geez. So I'm thinking about the best way to approach this. First of all, the sexual assault and racism has no place in the school district. That is unacceptable, first of all. As a school board trustee, that would be one of my first things, to acknowledge that this is unacceptable. And how we address this is by ensuring that, as I mentioned in the last forum, that our core values are systemic from the top all the way to the school sites and through for the students themselves. Aiding the students by giving them opportunities, creating safe places for them to be able to share what's going on, the issues that they're facing, these accounts, and making sure that they're protected is first, and I think really one of the most important things we can do as a district to really keep our students safe. And I think it's a matter of just changing the culture of the system itself and ensuring that racism and these types of things just are not acceptable, and that the repercussions will happen if and when these occur.
Thank you. Sabrina?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself there. So in addressing this is absolutely a serious issue. And I would say it's one of institutional racism, you know, across the system, not, you know, at one level. I think it's something that needs to start with leadership from the top down. And of course, I know the school board and Cindy Martin are very much dedicated to this issue, but also at each school level, I think we need to make sure we hold all of our leaders accountable, starting with the principal at each school. I think there needs to be anti-bias training for all school staff, as well as conflict resolution, to, you know, assess these issues, and not just the school staff. I think also our students as well need to, you know, also have this training. And it can go even further in terms of looking at levels of school suspension and how this is impacting our students of color at a higher rate than their peers. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to District E, Lavana.
That's really a great question. You raised two really important issues. I agree that there is no place for those things, and it does require leadership. Fortunately, I served on a sexual harassment, sexual assault prevention task force that was UC system-wide, where I learned a lot about some of the laws and rules governing that. And it's really important to have protocols in place that are respectful of the rights of all parties involved and create safety for everyone involved, and make sure that there's no whistleblower, that there is whistleblower protection. In terms of the racism, I think a lot of it is being actively anti-racist. I personally believe strongly in decolonization of education in general, where we decenter one voice so that we stop othering, and that reduces the space and opportunity for people to even think those types of behaviors are okay. And I think that is, those are two of the things that are really important to me that I would draw on. Thank you.
Thank you. Sharon?
Thank you for this question. And I want to say that I spent 17 years in San Diego Unified School District investigating sexual harassment and all kind of discrimination complaints for employees, and work so with the student population to help train them. One of the things I learned is that you cannot change how people think necessarily, but you can change their behavior. And when you work on their behavior to spell out guidelines to let them know that some things you will not tolerate, the system will not tolerate, then you begin to move things forward because there are consequences. It starts at the top, the board, the superintendent, and then it moves to the sites, the head of the schools, and we hold everyone accountable so that after a while, people begin to understand this culture will not tolerate discrimination. It will not tolerate harassment of folks, and you begin to get the kind of change that you are looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. From District D, Camille?
Thank you. This is a very complicated question. I know what, because I work for the community college district, that we've had ongoing training with this whole issue that's been going on in our country. So from where I sit, I believe that the people at the top, it has to start with the top first and then it trickles on down. And so everybody needs to be trained on this. Everybody needs to be aware of it. We need to then carry on with our students and our families, and to know that they're fully supported, and to know that all student minds matter. There needs to be, years ago, and I know when I was in K-12, we used to have character education, at least at the elementary school level. And somehow along the way, this has been lost. So I don't know what's happened, but I do know we need to be, as adults, we need to be leaders in this, and there needs to be repercussions whenever students start doing things like that, because I know there's been things that have gone online, anywhere on the web, and students are saying things to each other. There's no place for that in the school. So I believe with what there needs to be repercussions for when students have a behavior like this, but also too, we need to impart the knowledge and the understanding to be a respecter of people. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard?
Thank you, Rada. So the first thing that we always need to do is we need to listen to you. We need to listen to the students, because students actually understand the reality of what's happening on our campuses at a level that adults simply often don't. And students actually often have the answers. You know, several years ago, LGBTQIA students in our district led the way towards developing comprehensive anti-bullying policies because of the reality that they experienced on campus, and getting organized, you know, to push district leadership into achieving change. Similarly, now the conversation that we're having around race breaks down into issues like racism in student discipline, racism in grading practices, racism in many different ways that students are organizing and bringing that clarity to us. And so our job as district leaders is to listen to you and then act and move forward with policies that, you know, actually make a difference.
Thank you. The second question that I have for you all today is, world history, from my experience, has been mostly European-centric. How do you plan to expand the curriculum to include a more globally diverse history so students from different backgrounds can feel represented through education? From District D, we have Richard.
Thanks again, Rada. So Sharon and I were proud to take leadership in becoming one of the first districts in California to make ethnic studies a graduation requirement, and that's actually beginning with the 9th graders who are entering high school this year. And it's about creating ethnic studies courses in high school, but it's also taking that ethnic studies perspective throughout our entire curriculum, beginning in transitional kindergarten through the early grades in all subjects. It is absolutely important and necessary that students believe that what they're learning speaks to their own experiences, and in fact, doesn't contradict their own experiences. And so by moving forward with Ethnic Studies for All, working with the Ethnic Studies for All task force that is developing this policy and pushing the district forward, I think we're going to see a different curriculum even over the course of this current generation of students.
Thank you. Camille?
Well, the one thing that I think about this, when I was in community college, I went to Southwestern College here in San Diego, and one of the things that I decided as a Hispanic that I decided to take, instead of taking regular history class, which I took history classes in high school, is I took a Chicano studies. And for me, that was something that really opened my eyes to things I didn't even know about, even in my own history as a Hispanic. So I think we need to really, I mean, we can even look at the community college level and bring some of the studies into the K-12 arena to help students to have more of an awareness. So whether it's African studies or Chicano studies, or, you know, the different diverse cultures that we have in San Diego, I think it's important that we modify the curriculum, because right now I think a lot of people are just ignorant of other people's cultures, and there needs to be more of an awareness. And again, it goes back again, I'm going to say respect, to have an understanding. So, and I think if we can start this at a younger age to have people have more an awareness, I think it'd be beneficial, and people would be much more respectful of each other's cultures and honor that. Thank you.
Thank you. From District A, Sabrina.
So I think, as Richard mentioned, the ethnic studies curriculum is going to be very important and moving us forward in terms of celebrating, you know, many types of cultures and learning about those cultures, not just, you know, white people from Europe. And I think students will perform better and have higher grade rates if they're interested in the curriculum and they can see themselves in that history. And I also think it's important to incorporate not just the kids, but even the families themselves. When I was a PTA president at our grade school, we had a multicultural fair every year, and it was one of the hugest events of the year, and the students looked forward to it all year, and the parents from different cultures would make what was typical of that country. And we had, you know, dances from different countries, and you know, information, and it was just really special because it involved the whole community, again, not just the students, and really helping them to celebrate the diversity that we had.
Thank you. Crystal?
So I think one of the things that we need to do as a society, as a school district, as school sites, is to really level the playing field on what culture means. You know, so we have a very white-centered perspective, and to not preclude other cultures and what that means. So I think that how that works operationally is encouraging teachers to go beyond their usual curriculum, go beyond their usual book selection, asking their colleagues of color, their Black teachers, their Latino teachers, what's important for them maybe to include, and really asking parents, what kinds of books are they reading in the home? I think that this is going to require more than just a change in the curriculum, and I agree that the ethnic studies is a great step towards this. I do think we need to do more. I think we need to incorporate it at the very young ages, but I think it's about really making it equal and really allowing it to come out in all the different ways that we engage in one another at the school site.
Thank you. From District E, Sharon?
Richard kind of nailed it. This is not something that's new to us. We've been working on this for at least 2-3 years now as a board, and we saw the need and began to put together a committee, began to implement pilot classes, pilot courses. We have a whole committee that's established that is moving forward with our agenda. We have students on board with this. Ethnic studies is something that we've seen, and we know that we had to start somewhere, so we started with a course. We've now expanded. We're looking at how we permeate this throughout the whole system. The textbooks, we've talked about it. I mean, every time they bring a curriculum issue up, we've been talking about this. So this is not something that's a surprise to us. We have gotten on board and we've done something about it. And we're looking forward to expanding that work that we're doing.
Thank you. Lawana? You're on mute.
When my son was in the 3rd grade, he came home from school crying because his teacher didn't believe him when he shared something in class that I had taught him at home about history. And he went on the internet and he took all this stuff in, but he really had to fight for his truth. My vision is a decentering of the one narrative and actually decolonizing education to where we don't have phrases like regular history, because it's just history. And it's comprehensive and inclusive, and our students all feel like it speaks to their experience. And yes, there's no way that we can be exhaustive and include everything, because there's always new knowledge to discover. But I believe strongly that as we know more, we should do more. And as we know better, we should do better. And our students are demanding that we do.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here today, and thank you so much for answering my questions. Now I'll be passing it back to Kate.
And thank you, Radha, and thank you to all the students who worked to put together those questions. That was wonderful. So the next question from the attendees here tonight: what policies do you endorse to protect the health of both teachers and students from the ongoing uncertainties of the coronavirus? This time we'll be starting with District E, Lawana.
Well, that's a really great question. Number one, first and foremost, I think we need to believe science and listen to the medical professionals and not be pressured by politics to push people in jeopardy unnecessarily. I believe that a lot of the measures we currently use at my day job, PPE, hand sanitizer being widely available, mask requirements if we have to go to in-person, but ideally we find a way to improve what we're able to offer now in the safest way possible, because I think ultimately public health and safety needs to be a priority.
Thank you. Sharon?
This board has demonstrated that it believes in science, and that's why we pulled together a panel of doctors, medical folks, a panel of 10 folks to help the district to come up with the best policy in terms of reopening. Safety is our #1 priority, and then learning and equity. And we've demonstrated that by saying, although it was our heart's desire to open fully this fall, and we had said it at one board meeting, and we began to realize, no, we cannot do that because safety is our #1 priority. So I support our motion, our implementation of bringing students back as the science allows us to do so, and not rushing back based upon what the president or anybody else says. It's what the science says. Thank you.
Thank you. District A, Crystal.
So safety is of the utmost importance for everybody who's involved at a school site or delivering education. And I think that the policies, that we know about, the tactical kinds of things, the face masks, the washing of the hands, sanitization protocols, those are all important. And I think we also need to allow parents and teachers to decide, what their comfort level is. So I think we need some flexibility and adaptability. In the spring, when we were in crisis learning, I sent out a survey to find out kind of how parents were feeling. And I asked, what would need to be in place in order to go back to campuses if they open in the fall? And the #1 response, and there was about 300 responses. The #1 response was parents wanted to be sure that hand sanitizer was available. And so I think we need to be flexible and adaptable and ensure that parents and teachers have the choice to decide what they're comfortable with.
Thank you. Sabrina.
Well, as has been mentioned, we definitely need to focus on factual information, working with our public health leaders, many of whom I work with in my nonprofit organization with the San Diego Academy of Family Physicians. We have a wonderful situation in San Diego in that we have strong relationships between the county health, like you were talking about, the UCSD panel that's been chosen, which is public health leaders. And there's many organizations across the county that are working very closely together, which is not the case in all counties. They're not all working as well together as San Diego is. But in doing so, in looking at our schools, we need to make sure we have the proper number of nurses and mental health counselors, and also increase custodial support, and making sure that we only have a certain number of students in the classroom at the time. So again, partnering with existing organizations to make sure we're going back in the most effective way possible.
Thank you. District D, Camille.
What's been mentioned so far, obviously safety is at the top of the list. So I'm of the belief that, okay, if we take safety into consideration, but also to what does that mean? How does that translate in what's going on with today? So again, we would look to science. We would look to the doctors. We would look to our health people who are in charge of our health here in San Diego, Department of Health, the CDC, and look at all the facts. Look, what do we know so far about this virus? Because it's, as I'm reading a lot about this right now. What does that mean? Is because this virus has already mutated numerous times already. So what do we know about that? But most of all, we want to make sure that our kids are safe, that our teachers are safe, administrators, the school is safe, that everything is properly sanitized, and just to make sure we have everything that we need to make sure that no one will get sick, but also too, we have to take into consideration the vulnerable populations, students who have disabilities. So there's a lot to look at, and I think everything needs to be laid out on the table and taken into consideration, and see if it's possible to go back yet. So I want to make sure everything's covered.
Thank you. Richard?
Yeah, so we've approached this in collaboration with our teachers, with our parents, because we want to make sure that, at every step of the way we get this right. So as Sharon referenced, we brought together a team of local experts who also happen to be international experts from UCSD, epidemiologists, virologists, public health experts. And they laid out a pathway forward that begins with what do the conditions need to be with the spread of the virus in the community? And then what do we need to put in place at schools when we start to bring students back? So in terms of the spread of the virus in the community, we need to get the case rates down. We need to get the positivity rates down. We need to have appropriate investigation, contact tracing capacity. In the schools, we need to make sure that we have proper ventilation. That sometimes means improving our air conditioning system. Sometimes that means setting up outdoor classrooms. We've got to have the personal protective equipment. Everybody has to be wearing masks. And then we have to do this in phases, beginning with the most vulnerable students. And that's what we're doing first.
Thank you. Moving on to our next question. Do you support Measure C on the November ballot, which would change elections for school board trustees from at-large to district only? Yes or no? This time we're going to start with District E. Sharon.
I support that as a way to allay some of the concerns that folks have.
Thank you. Luana.
And here.
You're on mute.
Okay, yes, absolutely. I think it'll create greater opportunity for us to have a more diverse candidate base. There are many people who are reluctant or hesitant to enter the race because it is citywide, and I think we'll also be able to make sure that the specific interests of the members of each of the different communities within the district are having a voice that they select.
Thank you. District D, Richard.
No, I actually don't support this measure as it's written. And the reason for that is we have 5 districts, 3 of which are almost entirely north of Interstate 8, 2 of which are almost entirely south of Interstate 8. The majority of our students live south of Interstate 8. And what concerns me about the way that this measure is written is it takes away the ability of voters south of Interstate 8 from voting for the majority of the school board. And I think what it does is it creates a structural incentive for school board members who are north of 8 to not focus on the interests of all students, to only focus on the interests of students in their communities. And that creates equity problems. In our district, we have to have a system where every school board member cares about every student, particularly the most vulnerable students. And if we create a structural problem with that, I think we're going to see problems in terms of a commitment to equity.
Thank you. Camille?
Well, I think it should go that way. I should go in that direction. I believe that each person, like I'd say where I live, that I'm invested into my community. I'm aware of my community's issues and struggles. And so I think we can better focus on our particular districts, for lack of a better word, issues and stuff, so we can better address them. So, I mean, like I said, I'm invested in this district. This is where I live. This is my home. This is my community. And so this way I can listen to the voices of those people and those parents and those students in my community. So this would be more, I'd be able to be more hyper-focused and to meet the needs of my community.
Thank you. Going to District A, Sabrina.
So I understand both arguments about this issue, and I do support this initiative, but only more from a realistic perspective, and that's when it comes to actually running a campaign, because San Diego Unified is just such a huge place to run a campaign for, and I think it is kind of unrealistic for school board candidates to have to try to run what's as big as some of the congressional or bigger than congressional areas, try to cover that in a school board election, because we don't get the same types of donations and funding in general that someone who's running for mayor or who's covering the same area is getting. So more from that concern, but at the same time, if I'm honored to be elected for this position and it was done only in a regional election, I would still feel that responsible to be representing the entire district, even with that being the case.
Thank you. Crystal?
So as a first-time candidate running for any type of elected office, I've discovered there's a lot of barriers even to running for office. And I think that finances is a big one. You know, I am running my own campaign. I don't have a whole team of people behind me. So to go citywide would be very hard. But yet with support from my community, I think that I should be elected from my community. So I support this measure. And I think, you know, at the trustee level, we need those different perspectives. We need people from those different communities with those different pieces of information from their communities to work collaboratively to come up with decisions. You know, when you have too many people that are voted by the same people and the same support, you kind of get a one-track mind. So I think we need those different perspectives. We need that representation from the different communities. And I think that there's an assumption that if I'm voted from my own district, I'm not going to consider the entire school district. That's a false assumption. As a trustee, I would consider the entire community of San Diego Unified.
Thank you. Our next question. What changes in curriculum would better prepare high school students for adulthood in the contemporary world? We're going to start with District D, Camille.
Well, as a career counselor, definitely I believe that we need to have career readiness in the high school level. I know when I was doing my counseling field work, there was classes being offered at that time, and I was in school 2006 to 2008 during my master's program. And so there used to be life skills classes that we were offering within the school district. And also too, we need to have more of an emphasis because students need to be able, they shouldn't be waiting until they get into community college to be offered this information and this training. So providing internships, providing externships, providing mentors. And there's a program in Los Angeles called a Spark that they start doing this in middle school. They start providing internships. So I'm of the mindset that we need to start in high school and even younger, that in order for students to be able to compete in this global economy, that they need to start these internships or this training for career readiness as young as even elementary school, some version of it.
Thank you. Richard?
Yeah, so we have talked about the importance of ethnic studies in a curriculum that speaks to the actual experience of students. And career pathways is also a critical piece of transforming high school and even beginning at lower grades. You know, we began several years ago having joint meetings every year with the Community College Board. And what we do is we plan out really what's a TK to 14 system. And so we have by 6-7-fold expanded the number of high school students who take community college courses while they're still in high school. Our career pathway programs, which expose young people to opportunities, makes education relevant and actually propels students forward, whether they begin by going straight to college, whether they begin in a career, or whether they continue to go back and forth. And by the way, our career pathway courses are where we actually see the total elimination of the achievement gap. There is no achievement gap between students who are going through our career pathway courses because they're relevant and engaging.
Thank you. Luana?
That's a really good question. I think that just looking around, one, I think that there should be a stronger computer science component because we are a knowledge information system-based society. I'd like to see students graduate with a better, stronger sense of financial literacy. I'd like to see home economics re-emphasized because I get college students who don't know how to boil water. And of course, I would love to see civic engagement emphasized. I think that it's really important that we look at how to prepare students for life skills. Yes, I agree in pathways to career readiness, but I think being able to adult, as they call it, is something that they should be prepared for before they're actually adults.
Thank you. Sharon?
I hear what Richard said, and I agree. We have a beautiful program. We work with the community colleges and have an annual joint board meeting. And the CCTV program is good. But what I'm more interested in right now is ensuring that our students are looking at things beyond just academics. I want them to see themselves in a career, in a profession, even in the elementary schools and moving forward. And that does not mean that they have to lock themselves into a particular area, but they should be exposed. And that's why I've been pushing for more experts to come in from the Elementary Institute, from the VAPA, Visual and Performing Arts, from the construction industry, etc., so that it becomes real for the children and they can then move forward and be ready, prepared when they graduate or as they're moving out to graduate. Thank you.
Thank you. District A, Crystal?
So in my work as a university professor at USD and UCSD, I incorporate a lot of applied learning to my work with graduate students. And they really love this because it takes what they're learning and it applies them to real world environments. So when we think about the contemporary, what it means to be prepared for a contemporary world, it means understanding the greater environment around you as well as your own environment. And so how do you do that? You apply your knowledge in all contexts. And I've talked to students, and what students say for themselves is they want to learn what Dr. Richmond mentioned, financial literacy. They want to learn how to balance their checkbook. They want to learn how to change their oil in their car. They want to do these things that, some of us older folks take for granted, but they actually don't have opportunities to do. So I think that there is an opportunity there in our school environment to really allow them to take advantage of these things and to learn these skills that would really be useful as they move forward in the world, whether they go to college or take a vocational course, trajectory.
Thank you. Sabrina?
So yeah, as was mentioned, I believe that college prep is absolutely important to start from kindergarten going forward. I think Richard and Sharon already addressed that, not just talking about that in high school, but there are, a lot of students that maybe aren't going to be going to a four-year college. So we do have those community classes something for someone who's going to go into a management track, maybe somewhere, that would be important. Also looking at things like the apprenticeships that was brought up. I was interviewed by the Carpenters Union, and they have an incredible apprenticeship program for students that, is not a full, even 2-year program, I don't believe. And also also very important is looking at our future teachers. One of the things that I'd like to see more is identifying those kids early that we could see as future teachers, students of color that want to go back to their neighborhood schools and, and help be teachers to future students.
Thank you. So this will be our last question of the evening. Our last question is a two-part question. How will the school board measure success during distance learning? And have you considered alternatives to standardized testing during this time? And we're going to start with District A, Sabrina.
So I'm sorry, can you repeat that part? I know there was a lot of the
Absolutely.
Okay.
How will the school board measure success during distance learning?
Okay.
And have you considered alternatives to standardized testing?
So I think I'll start with the second part of that. That's a lot to cover in a minute. But I think looking at other alternatives to just standardized testing would be things like you can still look at students in small groups and assess their communication skills, writing skills, things of that nature, because a lot of times we put a lot of emphasis on standardized testing. And I know I have a daughter who's terrible at standardized testing. And I think there's a lot there. This gives us a greater opportunity to look at other ways to help our students assess those things. I think also with all the students having laptops at their disposal now, there's a lot of ways we can use the technology to our advantage, which we didn't have before. in terms of just being able to focus on the standardized tests. So, you know, it's silver lining that we can, you know, advance those other opportunities that we didn't have before.
Thank you. Crystal?
So I think what the standardized tests really provide is a baseline. You know, it's something that in theory is supposed to be applicable to all students, but we know that all students don't learn the same, they don't test the same, they don't perform the same, especially a district as large as San Diego Unified. So I think we're going to have to figure out multiple data points that help us understand a student's performance, as well as the school's performance, teachers' performance. You know, we need to look at multiple data points to really tell us to know the story behind it. You can't just look at one data point. So that's where I think standardized tests kind of, they lose their ability to help us there. But in terms of the distance learning, I think that's the big question. We don't know how we're going to measure success. And as a parent, that is an area of concern for me. I don't know how student success will be measured during the distance learning that hasn't been communicated. I don't know if they're going to be using the traditional ways of assessment or what. So I think that's an area that still has to be developed or it has to be communicated somehow.
Thank you. From District D, Richard?
Yeah, so Sharon and I and the board, we made a decision this summer that we were not going to simply relax our standards that we've had in place for several years now, because we're in one transition to distance learning that then may transition to a hybrid, that they then may transition to in-person classes all over the course of the year. What we've got to do is we've got to hold to the expectations that have led to achievement gains over the past several years. So we're looking at graduation rates, but we're looking at A to G passage rates, which some people, you know, call college readiness rates. We're looking at lowering the total number of long-term English learners, and of course, you know, continuing to reduce the dropout rate. So the standards that we've put in place that have never been based on once a year standardized tests, multiple measures, we will continue with through the course of this year, understanding that the learning that students will be experiencing will continue to change over the course of the year.
Thank you. Camille?
Well, from my perspective, because we're in a new phenomena with COVID and having to go strictly to distance learning, I think we need to really evaluate that. I don't think that teaching to the test is something that I've ever agreed with. Standardized testing is something that's been around for years. Not everybody tests well, but especially now because we're doing distance learning, we need to look at this a little bit differently. So I'm not sure exactly, you know, I don't know if we can change things midstream. We're already now in the fall semester, approaching the fall semester, that one thing that I've always considered, which I think would be really helpful and also provides transferable skills for our students, is project-based learning. For that, at least we'd be able to do an evaluation of our students to see how they are progressing. Because right now, the students, the parents, the families are under a lot of stress right now with even adapting to this distance learning model. So how can we support our parents? Do we, you know, stick our heels into the ground and stick to the same thing, or do we do something to adapt to make sure all of our students are successful? So for me, that's just really important. Thank you.
Thank you. From District E, Sharon?
This issue of standardized tests is something that's not new at all. And in fact, some of the colleges and universities are moving away from it, all the way back, SAT, etc. Or since its inception, really. It tends to discriminate against ethnic minorities. And that's something that all systems have to look at, including the universities and colleges. I'm glad Richard mentioned that about the distance learning piece, because that's something that the board decided adamantly that we were not going to have the same system we had in the spring, that there had to be something measurable. And the superintendent and her staff have been negotiating with the teachers to ensure that we will get a quality product this year, because that's what we're expecting as a board from them. Yes, some things will be different, but learning must occur, and that is our standard for this year.
Thank you. Luana. Oh, you're on mute.
Could you repeat the question? Because some of the answers seem to, I want to make sure I actually answer your question.
Absolutely. How will the school board measure success during distance learning? Have you considered alternatives to standardized testing?
So I'm going to take Sabrina's approach and start with standardized testing. I've never been a fan of standardized testing because of the bias, but also with any test, the one thing it really tells you is how well the test taker is able to meet the requirements of taking that particular test. It doesn't necessarily measure learning or knowledge. But in terms of measuring success, I would say the greatest measure of success will be having learning take place and having teachers able to connect with and create learning experiences for their students in whatever environment or medium they have to work with based on the conditions and circumstances. I think a big part of the success is to get through this with as much wellness and sanity and learning taking place in a healthy way. I think that, of course, we want to keep standards high, but we also want to make sure that we're being compassionate and considerate.
Before our candidates give their closing remarks, I want to thank you all for attending and asking such great questions. We'd like to invite you all here tonight to use Voter's Edge, which you can see in the bottom right, I believe, from you guys can see, of my screen. Voter's Edge is your online resource for more information about the candidates, ballot issues, and detailed voting information. All candidates for local office have been invited to include their information there with no cost to the candidate. I expect that all candidates here tonight have included their information there. Be sure you are registered to vote and that your address is correct to get a mailed ballot. Go to sdvote.com to check your voter status and registered address. Be sure you have also filled out the census form at my2020census.gov. It's important to fill out the census as it brings federal money to your community. And not only should you fill out the census, but please make sure your family and friends do too. And please attend more League of Women Voter events where we give in-depth information on all sides of critical issues affecting our communities. These events are listed on the website, lwvsandiego.org. Links to all of these resources are listed in the chat box. And now, for their closing statements, each candidate will have 2 minutes. We will reverse the order of opening statements and begin with Crystal.
Well, thank you again for hosting this forum. There were a lot of really good questions, tough questions. I'm learning a lot, and it's a work in progress. So, come November, I'm going to leave it up to the voters to decide who is the best person to represent District A. What I bring to the table is the ability to strategize and focus on the mission. What I bring to the table is an educator background, understanding learning outcomes, learning how to work with data, looking at the bigger picture of what it means, what education means. I bring a leadership studies background. I understand leadership. I understand governance. I have been in the nonprofit sector for more than 20 years, and I have served on multiple boards, and I have served my community through PTAs, SSCs, SGTs. So service is a big part of why I'm even doing this. Being a board trustee, Dr. Whitehurst Payne and Mr. Barrera, Trustee Barrera, you guys know this. It's a thankless job. So I know that moving into this role is not something that I take lightly. I understand the weight of what I would be carrying, but I also know that even though I may not have always the right answers, I'm going to ask the right questions, and I'm going to talk to the people. I'm going to get different perspectives so that any decision that I make as a trustee really accounts for multiple perspectives from students, parents, teachers, principals, administrators, staff, district personnel, community members, nonprofit organizations, anybody who's impacted by education, which is the entire community. is the perspective that I want to include as I make decisions. So, you know, I value and I treasure public schools. It's where I received my education. I benefited so much from it. And I will always treasure my days in public school. And I know what the difference can make in a child's life, as it made in mine, to have teachers that believed in me, to be able to learn and grow. And I just hope that come November, you can support me with your vote. Please get out there and vote. Again, my name is Crystal Trull, and I'm a candidate for San Diego Unified School Board, District A.
Thank you. Sabrina.
So I'd also like to thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening about the future of our public schools, which is so important. Both my parents were public school teachers. So growing up, we grew up in a very racially and ethnically diverse community just outside of Chicago. And they thought it was very important that we go to school with individuals from all walks of life, not just those that looked and sounded like us. And I think that was very important and instilled a really valuable, I think public school was just the concept was very valuable to me. And my husband and I both have advanced degrees and attended public schools our entire lives. So when we came to San Diego 27 years ago, it was important to us when we started to have students that we started to have kids that we live somewhere where they also had that same experience. And that's one of the reasons we chose Mira Mesa, where we raised our kids. And so, you know, I've really enjoyed this time. And in this current climate, it's also more important than ever that we have leaders with public health knowledge to help our schools move forward and make sure that it's safe and effective for our students to go back to school. And as a health educator, I have 25 years of experience, and I will support the health initiatives that we need to make sure that we have the resources for nurses and counselors. And I have the experience going forward of being the only candidate in this race with that type of public health knowledge and expertise. I'm an 18-year parent volunteer leader in the San Diego Unified School District, and I get results. As a PTA president, I was very instrumental in getting more parents involved. At the high school level, I helped to stave off teacher layoffs through the foundation by raising funds. I've been involved on multiple principal interview committees, as well as SGT and SSC committees, looking at things like budget and other very important items, including site modernization committees. Thank you very much for having me again. And my name is Sabrina Bazo. I'm running for San Diego Unified School Board in District A.
Thank you. Camille.
First of all, I want to thank League of Women's Voters for inviting me here today. It's a privilege and an honor to be here and to be able to be in this forum with my fellow candidates here. So one thing I was thinking about today is I thought, what would I say in a closing statement? And I'm thinking back as when I started this process of going back to school back in 1999, getting my bachelor's and onto my master's and onto my doctoral program, who are the people that influenced me? And so this is what's influenced me to also run for school board. As an educator, I believe that all children have talent. I believe that all children should have the opportunity to learn and be successful. I'm invested in education. This is why I went to school to emphasize in education. And I was thinking about a professor, one of my mentors in my grad school, and also to thinking about another man who just passed away, Sir Ken Robinson, who also was an influencer to me in my perspective on education. And what he had stated in one of his speeches on a TED Talk, it says, this whole standards movement has been, at best, a partial success, but in other ways, a catastrophic failure. We have have had appalling high levels of non-graduation, terrible rates of turnovers and resignations among teachers and principals, and a profession that has been in many ways demoralized by the whole process. What lies ahead is that the standards movement, what lies behind is that standards movement. It's well-intentioned to raise standards, but mistake it makes that it fails to recognize education is not a mechanical and personal process, that it can be improved by tweaking standards and regular testing. It's a human process. It's real people going through the system, and whether the system takes into account who they are, what engages them, it isn't incidental. It's the core of what education is. So again, my motivation is I'm an educator, I love students, and I want to see students to be successful. My name's Camille Harris. I have a doctorate in educational leadership. I've been an educator for over 12 years. I'm a native San Diegan. I'm a parent. I'm a single parent. And I absolutely love education. I love my students. So I'm running for Subdistrict D in San Diego, and thank you for having me here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Richard.
Yeah, no, thank you, Kate, and thanks again to the League for sponsoring the forum. And thank you to Lawana and Crystal and Camille and Sabrina and Sharon for a really thoughtful dialogue again. I enjoy these conversations that we've been having together. I do think that we need to recognize the moment that we're in, and we need to come together as an entire community and push forward for the kind of change that has not been in place in California for decades and decades. So the issue of funding, let's be clear with what has been happening. So as students, parents, educators, community leaders, people from all parts of our district, we've got to recognize that what we've been up against is a small group of people who want to tell us that public schools are failures so that we will allow them to continue to not pay their fair share of taxes, underinvest in public education, and then privatize what's left of the taxpayer resources that are going into public schools. We need to recognize that that era of that narrative, that public schools are failing and we've got to look to people at the very top to save us, that era has to be over. And the way that we end that era is we pull together as an entire community and we say, we will demand that public schools become the #1 priority at all levels of public policy, that we invest in what our students need, and that we move forward. And by the way, it is the public school system, as we push forward together and become an anti-racist institution, that is what is going to push back again on these same people at the top who want to divide us as a community and want to lower us to the least common denominator. We need to rise above that, and by creating a great public school system, that's how we push back, and we need to do it together.
Thank you. Lawana.
Thank you again for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. I too enjoy the dialogue. I have to say, this moment is a very important moment, and education has proven to be a driver not only of our society and the preparation of our little people into adults to become our future leaders, but an engine that drives the economy in so many other ways. Yes, it absolutely needs to be funded properly. At the same time, we need a whole community. There's an African proverb that says it takes a whole village to educate a child, and our children need our whole village, and we need people in leadership who are going to bring that village together. I stand here with 30 years of community organizing and leadership experience, where my focus was on bringing people together to solve problems. Whether it was in my professional life or my personal life, most of my free time has been dedicated to addressing problems, whether they be in equity for children or access, cultural education, or just addressing structural issues. I stand here ready to bring my skills, experience, and my energy, because it takes not only skills and ability, but it takes a mindset. My life has been no crystal stair, but all of the adversity that I dealt with from childhood until adulthood, I think has prepared me to better understand the needs and concerns of our students today. Many of the issues that our students are dealing with, I had to face as a child, and I had to navigate as a single parent. So I stand here, Dr. Lawana Richmond, for San Diego Unified School Board for District E.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sharon.
I want to thank you all for this opportunity to share. Also, it's been fun. And I'd like to thank the general public too, because they put their trust in me, and they've put me in this position. And it's been, someone said earlier that it's been frustrating, etc., but it's been fun also, because one of my #1 priorities from childhood was to ensure that students learned. I always loved children, and I always was trying to teach someone something. And my priorities as a board member, #1 has been safety, but then learning, education. I've dedicated my life to ensuring that students learn, because I'm a product of the South, the segregated South, and I realize that any child can learn, and every child can learn if we help that child to access it. I'm a living witness that it's possible. And equity is another part of that, and I've demonstrated that when I've been on the board. When I saw Crawford had issues, I was at the board hammering on folks to make those changes. Lincoln had a problem, I was right there in front. I've been involved in my community, doing the work and not just talking about it, but actually getting results. So I believe that public schools, we have the answer. This whole pandemic has demonstrated that without the schools, our economy can't get back online, because they're waiting for the schools to come back online. So we've had a paradigm shift right here to let folks know, yes, schools are important. They're #1 in our society, and we need to support them. I want you to vote for me as soon as you get your ballot. Vote for me, Dr. Sharon Whitehurst Payne, for District E. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of the League of Women Voters San Diego, I want to thank the candidates for running for office and for attending our forum tonight. And thank you all again. You are here tonight because you are following our motto. Don't just be a voter, be an informed voter. Of course, don't forget to vote on or by November 3rd, and encourage others to vote as well. Thank you.
Thank you.